Now, it doesn't usually matter which way UVs are facing, especially in 2D software like Photoshop, where we would just layer some images or some art over the top of the UV shells. But it does matter for procedural software like Substance. So we do need to change how our UV map is set up just a bit. So I'm going to turn off my checker box and my image in the back. And let's change some things here. So to begin with, I'm going to just push everything off screen so that we can isolate these two pieces right here. And I'm going to unstack them. Now, let's go ahead and bring these parts back. I am going to scale this one down just a bit because it is the underside and it doesn't matter what it looks like. Let's see here. This is always the tricky part of trying to get everything to fit. Let's scale these down a bit. See if we can get them right in there. All right. Let's grab these guys and turn it. Maybe you can hear it, but it's dumping rain outside. So if that's really loud, my apologies. Now, one thing to point out that is important, your UVs should be facing the right way. They should be matching each other. If you have two that are going up and down, vertical, and one going horizontal, that's going to be a problem because your textures are not going to match. So I'm just going to scale these down a bit and make sure they're all rotated in the right direction. And we want these to be roughly the same size. This is always the fun part about texture mapping or UV mapping is getting things to fit. It's like a puzzle that you're trying to solve. All right, we have all of our rivets here. I am going to scale them down. Oops. Make sure that they're all selected because we don't need them to be too big. And one by one, I'm just going to bring them up and get them all in, like so. All right, that looks much better. Now there's nothing stacked on top of each other. There's nothing hanging outside of our box here. Let's check really quickly. Everything still looks good and well textured or well UV mapped. Now, it is important because we did make changes to our object here. We do need to delete by type history and freeze transformation before we export our model. So I'm going to select the entire stool. I'm going to hit freeze transformations and delete by type history so that this is like a brand new model with no history attached to it. Now I am going to go back to general. And we can remove the texture attached to it. So I'm going to delete this and attach just a basic material. All right, close that. Now let's save this scene as, so save scene as, and I'm going to name it stool UV mapped substance so that we know this is the one that's going to Substance Painter. Save as. Now with the entire model selected, we're going to go to File. We are going to go down to Export Selection. I'm going to open up the options box. Now make sure that your file type is set to, it's probably automatically going to be set to Maya binary, but we don't want that. We want it set to, let's see here, OBJ export. OBJ stands for object. So that's always a nice thing to remember is that we're exporting an object. Everything looks good. Okay, let's export selection. Now we could just do it straight into the scenes file, which it will automatically prompt you to do. But I like to exit out and send it or save it into the assets file right here. So I'm going to name this stool model. Export selection. All right, so now this model has been exported and we can take it over into Substance Painter to texture. All right, we are here in Substance Painter and we are ready to import our stool model into the scene here to begin texturing it. So we are going to go to File, New. We can select a template, meaning what type of materials are we going to make. So we could do PBR, a metallic, or roughness, but in this case, I'm fine with just leaving it blank. Let's select our file here. Now let's make sure we are in the correct project folder, UV stool, and remember we saved it in the assets folder. So let's go into assets. There's our stool model. We're going to open that up. Make sure that your document resolution is at 2048, and you most likely will have these toggled on when you first open up Substance Painter. We don't want those. We want to turn those off. All right, let's hit OK. And it may take a moment, but there you go. There's our stool. So take a look at what we are seeing in Substance Painter. Well, we have our view here of the stool on the left-hand side. We can move around it almost identical to how we look around our scene in Maya. But we also have a second window open, which shows us our UV map that we created. Now, we can change our display. So right now we have it set to 3D and 2D. We could do 3D only, or we could do 2D only. But in this case, we want to do a 3D and 2D view. Now, before you start anything else, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to bake our texture maps. Now, I did talk a little bit about baking in one of my pages in this module, just talking about what that looks like and what the purpose of baking our textures are. So we are going to bake our textures. We can either come to the texture set settings here, and we could go down to Bake Mesh Maps, or we can just click this really adorable little croissant. And if we click that, that's going to open up our baking, our texture set menu as well. All right, things you're going to change. You're going to change the output size to 2048. Let's also up the dilation width here fully. And let's go down to the ambient occlusion and let's up the rays on that. We can also do that in the curvature where it says secondary rays. Secondary rays, we can do that in the thickness as well. We can do that in the bent normals, opacity, doesn't matter. So when we're talking about secondary rays or rays, changing what I did there, making that number higher was I was changing the number of rays. Now, rays, the more rays you have can yield better results at the cost of increased processing time. Now, what are rays? Well, remember that we talked a bit about ray tracing in my page on Arnold. Rays are virtual lines of light traced from a camera into a 3D scene to simulate how light physically behaves, creating realistic lighting, reflections, and shadows. Rays are cast for each pixel on the screen and interacts with objects by bouncing off surfaces, which is also called reflection, passing through them, which is called refraction, or being absorbed. This process determines the color and illumination of each pixel, producing high-quality photorealistic images. Basically, I said it that we were going to have more rays, making the quality of our texture a lot better. Now we're going to hit this Bake Selected Textures right here. And you can see it's baking all of our texture maps. So we are getting our normal map, our ambient occlusion map, our curvature map, our thickness map, height map, all of that good stuff. Once it's done, we can return to painting mode. All right, here we are in painting mode. Take a look at the materials here. Substance comes equipped with a lot of free materials. Now, we have the ability to do all the materials or smart materials. Now, what's the difference between normal materials and smart materials? Now, normal materials are presets with single layers, meaning they can range from simple color values to complex tiling materials that you make externally. So materials don't create the details on your mesh, so it's up to you to create that with masks and other techniques. Basically, materials are standard, uniform tiling materials. They have no unique mesh-specific details and require no baking. Now, smart materials are presets for a whole layer stack. You should see them as a folder with layers inside which have been saved and can be reused elsewhere. So a smart material contains effects and layers that work on every mesh with baked maps. And smart materials are unique to Substance Painter. Aside from tiling, uniform detail, they also have mesh-specific details that are automatically adapted to your mesh. So that's what makes them smart. They're automatically adapting to your object. All right, let's start putting some textures on our stool here. Now, I'm thinking that I want the top part of my stool, the actual seat, to be leather, and the legs, the footrests, and the rivets to all be wood. Now, you don't have to copy me. You're free to do any of these other smart materials. If you want to have fabric, jade, it's a beautiful one, gold, that's completely up to you, but I want leather and wood. So I'm going to type in leather. And let's find a good material here. So now, let's try this one. Okay, that's interesting. That's like a cowhide. Very natural looking. But I don't really want that. I'm going to undo. And let's try this one here. Okay, that's an interesting one. That looks like car leather, like what you would see on the seats in a nice race car. But it's a little too sleek and modern and clean, and I'm really looking to have more of a weathered, natural, damaged looking stool. So I'm going to undo that, and let's see. This is damaged one. Let's do this one. Okay, look at that. That's really nice. So you can see there is my leather, but there's also all these little damaged spots on it too, where it looks like there's some wear and tear. Like this is a very commonly used stool. I think I'm going to stick with this one. This is kind of the one that I was thinking about. Now, I don't want my entire stool to be leather. I just want the top. So I do need to isolate just the top part. So that one is, this one's the only one that has leather on it. I'm going to come over to my layers panel over here. And on my smart material here, I'm going to right click and add a black mask. Now I just want to mask it so just this part is selected. I can either draw that by hand, or I can come to the polygon fill button right here on the left-hand side. Now this one, if I have this one selected, I could select the faces of my polygon. Or if I come here and change it from polygon face fill to mesh fill, I also have them in the options down here in the properties. If I have the mesh fill selected, I can just click my entire seat area and it will automatically mask it so just this one is visible and is the only one that has the leather texture attached to it. All right, awesome. Let's change some of the things on our texture here. For one, I don't really like how large the leather pattern is. I feel like it's a little unrealistic. And I also don't like how reflective the surface of the leather is. You can see there's a lot of specularity, and leather doesn't tend to be that reflective, so we are going to make some changes to this material. Okay, so let's change this smart material. I'm going to open up the folder here, and you can see we have all the different parts of our smart material. So if I turn off the visibility on the damages, you can see that turned off the visibility of all that wear and tear. Visibility of the edges highlight, that's the highlighting. And the visibility of the leather pattern. Okay, so we can now see that the leather pattern is where this pattern is. So we should be able to scale it from here. Let's go down to the properties. I accidentally got rid of my properties. Let me dock that again. I am going to make sure that the leather pattern is selected in my layers panel, and I'm going to come down And where you see it says UV transformation, scale, and tiling, this is where we can change the scale of the pattern itself. So you see if I scale this down, it makes the pattern very big. And if I scale it up, it makes it much smaller. Just a little more realistic. I'm actually going to type it in and make that 8. There we go. That looks much better. So now our leather is a little bit smaller. The pattern is a little bit smaller and a little more realistic. Now I do want to affect the roughness as well because I don't want this model or this material to be as shiny as it is. So I'm going to check to see. I think it's in the base color. It is. So with base color selected, we can come down here and you can see we have all of our maps. We have the color map, metallic map, roughness, normal, height, and we can change them here because remember, our maps are baked into our model. So here's the roughness. If I slide this down, it's going to make the leather material super, super reflective. A lot of specularity. But if I scale it up, it's going to become a lot less reflective, which is exactly what I wanted. I have a little spider crawling on me, so I got to pause. Give me 1 second here to get him off. Okay. So if I scale this up, that gets rid of some of the reflectiveness, which is exactly what I wanted. I could even do that a little bit more. And you can check to see how reflective your object is by holding Shift and sliding your right mouse, holding your right mouse button and sliding across your scene. You can see that's rotating the light that's surrounding our object. And that's just a nice way of checking reflections and shadows. So a lot less reflective. Now it's a little too clean for me. So we can actually make our own roughness map. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to go up to this little paint bucket right here, which allows me to make a new layer. And this is going to just be a roughness layer. So in the properties, we want to turn off the color, the metal, the normals, and the height. We just want rough selected. Now we could change the roughness to a pattern. So if I click this roughness here, we can do something like this. And you can see now the roughness of this new roughness layer is giving us a pattern too. That's kind of interesting. It's making it look like maybe it's a little wet in places and dry in others. We can affect it by maybe messing around with the balance. So that's like the contrast. If we toggle off false on the invert, that's going to flip it or invert it. We have the contrast too, which is very sharp, looks very unrealistic. We can also do the scale, which is interesting. And we can also do random. So if we click random, it randomizes that pattern. But I kind of like it because it makes it look water damaged. So I'm actually going to bring down the scale a bit, and I am going to up the balance a little bit. And now let's rename this to roughness because we made this new roughness layer. Let's change how visible it is. So if we go up to where it says base color and come down to roughness, we can actually change the opacity of how visible this roughness map is. So if we have it at 100%, it is very visible. But if we lower the opacity to, let's say 17, you can see now it looks like there's water damage, but faint water damage, which is exactly what I wanted. So now with this roughness layer selected, we can change it back from roughness to base color. So now once again, we're editing the base color. All right, I also want to mess around a little bit with the damage. So let's go to the damages layer and let's go to the mask editor. And here we can mess around a bit with the damage here. So if I come to, let's see, we have the micro details. That's for the AO map. We don't really want that. Let's see, we have the global balance here. So if I do that, if I up the global balance, you see that damage spreads a ton. So now it looks super damaged, super rubbed away. If I bring that back down, it gives me less damage. If I do global contrast, it also gives it a softer edge to the damage. Or if I bring that up, it gives it a really hard damage like this. Bring that to somewhere right back in the middle somewhere. The texture is kind of like the opacity. If I bring that all the way down, it's super visible. And we could also do the position gradient, but that's not very important. Thickness. The thickness also spreads the damage. So let's spread it just a bit from what it was originally at. So it looks like there's been a lot of wear and tear. All right, that looks good to me. So you can go ahead and you can keep changing it. You can mess around with the damages, the leather pattern, adding more roughness, changing the base color. And it is storming outside, so my apologies. It's really, really loud in the background. But I think I'm done with the top of my stool. So I'm going to close my Smart Material, and I'm going to rename this to Stool Top. And now let's put a material on the rest of the body here. Now I don't want leather, I do want wood. And I have a couple options. We could have a nice smooth wood. Let me put a nice smooth wood on here. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. That makes it look really nice and slick and clean. But I'm not sure I want that. I do want it to look weathered. Try this one. Oh, I like that one. That looks great. Maybe we could do that one. Try some others. I'm going to click that one. Oh, that one looks great. That's very natural. I think I'm going to stick with this wood Ship-Hole Nordic one. Now we have to do the same thing that we did with the leather material. We do need to isolate it to just this part of the stool. So we need to right-click and add black mask. With the polygon fill selected and the mesh fill selected, we can now just click all of the parts of the stool. I can also just click and drag to make sure all those rivets are selected. And let's check this out. Okay, that looks great. So now we have this nice wood material attached. We could also open up this Smart Material as well, and you can see we have a lot of patterns attached to it. We have some roughness stains, so if I turn that on and off, you can't really see it, but the visibility. There's the pattern. There's some dust to it to make it look dusty, so if we don't want it to look dusty, we can turn off the visibility or turn that back on. We have some dirt patterns, very subtle, more dust patterns. Wood fiber patterns. So those are, you see we have the bigger pattern, which is all these big grooves. And if I turn on the visibility of the wood fibers, it's these smaller little grooves. And we have the roughness of the wood as well. So you can change everything in the properties if you want. The scale, the tiling, the contrast. You can add new maps and layers. But I'm okay with it just like this. And I think that my stool is done. So I am going to close my Smart Material here, and I'm going to name this stool body. And we don't need this guy. Delete him. And we can rename this entire shader that we just created. So I'm going to come up to where it says Standard Surface 1 SG, right? Double click on that one, and I'm going to name this shader. I'm actually going to name this stool shader. All right, so now let's export these textures that we just created because we have our color map. We did bake our normal map, our height map, our AO map, our roughness map. And now we want to export them and we want to take the stool and those maps into Maya to set them up. So I'm going to come to File. I'm going to go down to Export Textures. And I want to pick where that is being sent to. So I want to make sure I'm doing this inside of my, let's see if I can find it, inside of my correct project folder, my Maya project folder, which is this guy. And I want to put these textures in the source images file because remember everything, all the images that get loaded into Maya go into the source images file. And I'm going to make a new folder. And I'm just going to name this substance. So inside of this substance folder, I'm going to select it. Let's see here. What else can we change? Well, this all looks good. Let's check out our texture maps here. So you can see what are going to be the maps that are exported. Well, we're going to have our base map, our metallic map, which is also the specularity, our roughness map, our normal map, our height map, and our AO map. Now, we don't really have any metallic textures attached to our stool. So if we wanted to, we could toggle this one off. But I'm okay with all of these maps coming, all these texture maps being exported and just using the ones that I want. So I'm going to hit export down here. And there we go. It says export successfully finished. So let's check out those texture maps. Let me open them up in my project folder. I'm doing this on my other screen. UV stool. So now in the source images folder, here is my substance file, and there are all my texture maps that we just exported from Substance Painter, which we can now take those maps back into Maya and apply them to our stool. All right, back in Maya, let's plug in those textures. We're going to do it the same way that we did it with the texturing and acts portion of Project 4. Now, if I was to try to render out an image of our stool here, you're going to see it's black. That's because we don't have any lights in our scene. So let's put down some lights. I'm going to go up to Arnold, lights, and I'm going to put in a physical skylight. Now, I'm going to come over to the outliner. I'm going to select that physical skylight, and I'm going to come to the attribute editor on the far right, and I want to mess with the intensity a bit. But first, let's check it out in the render view. Let's run this. There we go. It's a little dark, so let's bring up that intensity. That works for me, somewhere around there. Now I do want a little ground plane underneath my stool, and I also find this skylight to be very distracting, so I'm going to turn off the visibility of it. Let's go up to Show, Viewport, and we don't want lights to be visible in our viewport, so I'm going to click that off. Now I'm going to come up to the poly modeling shelf, and I am going to put down a disk. I'm going to scale it up. So now, when we open up the render view and run it again, we have a ground. All right, I'm going to take a snapshot of this. So a little snapshot is like saving a little screenshot of our render view in progress. So step by step, we can take little screenshots and see how our stool is progressing. So it's this little button right down here. If I click that, we now have this little screenshot. I'm going to pause the render view. I'm going to drop that back down, and let's apply the texture to our stool here. So temporarily, I am going to turn off the ground plane. So I'm going to do the Control H to turn off the visibility. And let's go to Hypershade. Now in Hypershade, we do need to create a new, let's see, I didn't want that, so I'm going to reset my current space here. We are going to create a new shader for this stool. We are going to use an AI standard surface shader because we are rendering an Arnold, so we need to use an Arnold shader. Let's select Arnold shader, and let's do an AI standard surface shader. While we're here, let's just name it to stool S for shader. So now with this selected, we can start plugging in our texture maps. Remember, this is going to be very, very similar to texturing the axe. Now in the base is where we plug in our color map. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to click the checker box. We're going to select a file. And right here is where we select the file. Remember, we put all of our exported texture maps into a file called that we named Substance. And we put this Substance folder inside of our source images file. I'm going to click into here. And there is our color map right there. I'm going to open that up. And let's select our entire stool here, and let's assign the material to the selection. we go. So now our material has been, or at least the color map has been put onto our stool here. So now I'm going to bring back the visibility of the ground plane, and let's open up Arnold render view again. I don't think we're going to get that exact same angle, but there we go. All right, so there is the stool with the color map plugged in. So you can see it's still really shiny. That's because we have not plugged in or attached our roughness map yet. So right here, I'm just going to take a screenshot. So now we have it untextured, and we have it with the color map, the color map attached. Now I am going to stop the renderer here, and let's go back to Hypershade. Let's actually turn off the visibility of the ground plane really quick by hitting Control H, and let's open up Hypershade. So we did the color map already. Let me select our shader again. We can close that, and underneath specular is where we're going to plug in our roughness map. So this guy right here. Let's go to File. Now we don't have it attached quite yet, so let's click this little folder right here. And inside of the substance file, it's going to be underneath roughness. There we go. Let's open that up. And remember, we need to change the color space from sRGB to utility raw. Let's make sure it's selected first, though. So I'm going to select, yes, this is our roughness map here. Oh, that is selected to raw. And let's turn on alpha is luminance. Now it's not updating it quite yet. Let's go back to raw. There we go. Now it's updating. It takes a couple of times to change the color space and toggling on alpha's luminance a couple of times in order to update the actual texture map. So if you're changing it and you're like, nothing's happening to it, visibly happening to it, you just got to do it a couple times to get it to actually work. So now we have our roughness map attached. Let's run the render view. Oh, let's bring the visibility of our ground back on, so Shift H. And now with that running, all of that reflectiveness is now gone. And now we have a nice roughness map attached to our stool. So, looks good. Remember, it's low quality, but that is okay. We can export a higher quality image if we want. I am going to take a snapshot. There we go. So there we have it, untextured. Here it is with the color map attached, and here it is with the color map and the roughness map attached. Now we do have to do one more map, and that is going to be the normal map. So I'm going to stop the renderer here, drop that down, let's bring up Hypershade again. I'm going to click the shader right here, and we plugged in the roughness, so we can close the specular. Now remember, we need to go to the geometry tab to plug in our bump map or our normal map. In this case, it is a normal map. So I'm going to plug it in here, and we're going to go to File, and we're going to change it from use as bump to tangent space normal. So that determines if it's going to be used as a bump map or a normal map, and we want it used as a normal map. Now where you see it says bump value, that's where we're going to plug in our file. And there's our normal map. There's one without anything actually baked into it. You want to use this one. Plug that in. And let's change the color space from sRGB to raw. And make sure alpha is luminance is toggled on. So now our material here should be updated. Let me open up the render view again, and let's run it. Okay, so now all of those little fine details should be visible, meaning you're going to see those grooves, those indents, and all of that textures that are attached to it. It's very low quality because I have it set to low quality because I don't want Arnold to really slow down my software here, but they're plugged in. If we want, we can go up to File, Save Image, and let's actually go to File, Save Image Options. That's fine. We can leave it like that. File, Save Image, and I'm going to name this Stool Textured. You don't need to save an image if you don't want to. I just want to be able to see that you have your textures applied. So now our stool here, you can see, is fully textured. Now there's a little bit of some deformation here. Let me explain to you why that is. That's because sometimes, let me go to the UV editing workspace. Let me select my stool here. Sometimes, as you can see, not that. Maya shifts around the UV shells a little bit. When you're hopping between software, it's so obnoxious, but sometimes these UV shells will shift on their own, and you kind of just need to push them back into place. So that should have closed the gap, and it did. A little bit. It's still not lined up perfectly where it was before, but that's all right. So when you see some deformations happening, especially in baked textures, because we did bake and export our textures from Substance Painter, and you see weird deformation, that's probably because you need to open up the UV editor and you'll check out and see how Maya shifted around some of the shells. But other than that, you have officially textured your stool and you are all set. All right, really quickly, I forgot that we need to go up to File, Save Scene As, and let's name this Stool Textured. And we'll do sub for substance. And then that is going to be our finished scene. And what you can do is you can just duplicate the project folder that we've been working with, which is the week 3 project folder. You can just duplicate it and rename it to be the proper name for this week's project. Other than that, you are all set.